Hello, everyone. I'm Jen Beck, Community Relations Manager with the Nashville Technology Council. Welcome to our Tech Coach event. Today, it's preparing you for the first day on the job and the first 90 days. I'm pleased to introduce our speaker today, Allie Feiner with AllianceBernstein. She is the VP of Global Technology and Operations, Head of GTO Professional and Organizational Development. She works a lot with the new employees coming into the company, whether they are students transitioning from the workforce or career transitioners. It's good information for all. So, Allie, let's get started. I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen. I think we're going to get our slides up and going here, but really excited to be here and talk to you today. I am Allie Feiner, as Jen said. I have a very long title that basically means I sit over a lot of our people, our emerging talent here at AllianceBernstein. I'm really excited to talk about starting a new job, whether it's a new role completely or entering the workforce or re-entering the workforce. I work with a lot of this population, and there's so many things to think about. And one of the things you'll hear consistently through the presentation is it's good to ask questions. So like Jen said, please come in, ask questions, interject, raise your hand. Happy to do it. And if you want to do that as we're talking, great, or we will have a portion at the end as well. So we will go ahead. Can you all see, Jen? Can you see the slides?
I don't see the slides. I see you. There, now I do.
Awesome. All right. Well, today, just a quick overview of what we're doing. Obviously, some introductions, then talk about getting started, some quick workplace etiquette, a bit of a discussion on time management, and then talking about communication through different mediums. And then, like I said, we'll have an opportunity to ask some questions at the end. So when you're starting a new job, it can be really anxiety producing. That first day is going to be a blur. So there's a lot of things that you can do to prepare. Some of them are really simple, things like planning out your commute, making sure that you have all of the forms. Typically you may need some form of identification, some paperwork, anything that your recruiter or HR person has asked you to bring. I like to lay everything out the night before. I still do that every night. I think that it just helps me in the morning be really fresh, feel like I have a plan. And then you're going to prepare for a really long day. Make sure you eat something, get your coffee if you're a coffee drinker, have some water. Different offices have different things, but you want to make sure you're prepared and have everything that's going to make you feel comfortable so you can show up as your best version of yourself on your first day to work. Again, planning for your commute, here in Nashville, traffic can be a bit tricky. So I always like to give myself more time. And if I'm early, I have time to look over my notes or take a deep breath or have another cup of coffee. In that first day, you want to just be excited, come in with energy, have a great first impression, and know that you're probably not going to get to do too much productive work. And that's okay. It takes a lot of time for different systems to get loaded and access and get your email going. So it's a bit of a marathon of a technical day and maybe even a first week. Now, as you start thinking about the first 90 days of your career, it's really important to set goals. And sure, many of you have heard about SMART goals. I like to make them smarter with an R, because that makes them refinable. So things that you think will be important may get reprioritized. Things that the company is focusing on may change as well. But that first 90 days, it's really your time to learn and absorb everything going on around you, whether it's the culture of the firm, your team, your different team members. Maybe it's a new industry and you need to do some learning on what they do. There's a lot of opportunities for upskilling. A lot of companies have great training resources. So it's great to use this time to go ahead and educate yourself. I think that one thing I like to do in the first 90 days is go on what I call a listening tour. So, who are all my key stakeholders? Who are the folks I'll be working with? Maybe who's got a job that's similar to me? and really take in and listen all of the advice that they have and the things that they've learned. And that's before I'll go in and start to make any suggestions, really. Definitely don't want to make any big changes because it's just you getting used to a new environment. So I have this quote here, and I'll let you read it. But the gist is based on a social psychology and personality science journal study, they actually found that people who came in dressing good, feeling good, looking professional, did a better job and had an easier time focusing. So I think there's a little bit of the fake it till you make it perception. And it's okay to go in and look good, be excited. And remember, that's your body language too, not just what you're wearing. So make sure that on your first day, you're coming in, you're putting your best foot forward. We'll talk a little bit about attire here shortly as well. So moving into workplace etiquette, I think that, we mentioned attire quickly, and it's going to be different depending on where you are. I like to think about dressing for my day. Of course, different places have different standards of what's acceptable. You want to make sure that you ask before. It's a great question to ask. What do people normally wear to work? How formal is it? What's acceptable? These are all very normal questions that our HR people are used to answering. But then you want to think about dressing for your day. Maybe it's a business casual environment, but you have a really big meeting with an external client or a presentation. These are days that I like to get a little bit more dressed up so I feel good, ready to go. I'm making a good impression. And it lends some real validity to the things that you're saying when you come and you're ready to go. The next thing I wanted to talk about is asking questions. And I think it's just important to let you know it's okay to speak up. This is before, this is when you start, and this is throughout your whole career. I think it's great when we get really thoughtful, pointed questions that are specific to the work that we're doing or the industry that we're in. It shows that people have done their research. I don't expect you as a manager to have all the answers coming in. What I do expect is to take notes on some of those answers and write things down and ask for clarification, because asking the same question over and over again can be a little frustrating to a manager. A lot of the times, too, I like to see if people have taken the initiative to come in, try to answer the question and say, hey, is this correct? So that really takes it to the next level. And with managing expectations, again, it's that over communication. So very frequently, I will sit down with my manager and ask, hey, I have these 3 or 4 things that I need to do. What needs to get done? I can get 2 done this week, 1 done next week, or whatever your time frame is. And I let him help me understand what the priority is, because you need to also communicate what's feasible to accomplish. We all want to be yes people. We want to be excited. We want to be productive as we start in our new roles. But saying yes to everything means you have to sacrifice on the quality of some things. It's also okay to ask who else is working on this or who you can collaborate with. But always, if in doubt, communicate. So with that comes time management. And I will say that calendars rule the corporate world. No matter what tool you use, if it's Outlook or a different software, Google, it is how everybody in most companies manages their day. It's how I manage my day. I even put my personal events and activities in there. So I'm super organized on when I have time to take on things for work, or if I have to be somewhere. I will even go ahead and book in travel time if I've got to go to a different office, or be somewhere. And it may feel strange to put personal things on your calendar at work, and know that you can always put something on there as a block personal appointment, because that way people won't go to schedule things with you and then you're unavailable. So when you think about time management and managing it effectively, Another tool I love to use is lists, and everyone has to do what works for them. But I am very big on setting my priorities each day for what I know I need to accomplish, but also having my longstanding to-do list of a lot of the things that will need to get done in the next week, couple of weeks, months, and build myself almost a project plan so that I know how to manage my time. And depending on what your role is, each day could look very different. Every day for me looks very different, or there can be some standard procedures and things that you have to follow. As far as the day goes, you want to make sure that you're planning it effectively, managing what you say yes to and what you say no to. So, with time management comes boundaries. And that's a lesson that takes everybody a while to learn on their own. And boundaries are different for everybody. I think if you are, you know, if it's very important to you to be home for dinner with your family, manage that expectation and let them know. And maybe the answer is you have to log on a little bit later. Maybe you're in a global environment. I do a lot of business across the world, and sometimes that requires me to take calls at different hours. And so when that happens, I need to think about how I schedule the other things I need to do, both personally and professionally, in alternate time slots. I think if I leave you with one piece about boundaries, you have to make sure to take breaks and prioritize some self-care, because you being the best version of yourself is what's going to make you the best version of an employee at work. And sometimes we get really frustrated, we get really into something that we're working on, and the best thing to do is to walk away and take some space and think about it. I have managed folks who need to go for a walk, they need to exercise, they need to, whatever it is for you. I encourage you to figure that out, and make sure you build that into your own calendar.
Allie, I have a quick question for you.
Absolutely.
Um, how, I know I'm still trying to figure this out and sometimes I'll change, but going back to the lists, how do you manage your list? I used to always have it on paper and then I'd have to rewrite it every day, which actually is effective for me. But now I'm doing it more in Asana, which is a tool that we use for productivity and organization at work.
Oh, nice.
But I kind of flip flop and change, and I'm just curious to know how you manage your list.
It's a great question. And I'll again emphasize it's going to work. What works for me may not be what works for you, may not be the best way to do it. But for me personally, I take great satisfaction in just crossing things off my paper list, Jen. And so especially the things that I'm like, hey, today I'm going to set out, I have to achieve these 4 things. I will usually write those in my notebook. My more long-term goals and projects, I do manage more electronically. I'm a big fan of OneNote or sticky notes. Virtual sticky notes are great, but if you came into AllianceBernstein, you would see that there's Post-it notes all over my desk and notes on top of my lists. And I think for me that is helpful, but it also allows me to reprioritize, right? So if it seems too long, then it's too much to get done in one day. And sometimes you have to kind of give yourself some grace and know you're going to carry things over, or ask for more time.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions while we're paused here?
I don't see any.
All right. So communication, this is big, whether you're starting a new role, whether you've been in your role, pretty much every facet of your life this can apply to. So email etiquette is also going to vary from organization to organization. And it's perfectly okay to ask, do we email people and say, hey, Allie, or hello, Miss Feiner? I think it's going to depend. I think things have moved much more towards the more casual, but if in doubt, always be a little bit more formal. Typically people will have their names in their emails. They'll have their names, their titles, and their signatures. Make sure that you spell their names right. I think that is one of the easiest things you can do right. But one of the quickest ways to maybe not make the best first impression. With your emails too, you want to be concise, right? People are getting so many emails every day. I can only imagine how many emails are popping up in my inbox while I'm sitting here talking to you. And if I can skim it really quick and figure out what the ask is, I'm going to get to it quicker. If it's confusing, I may file it away for when I have more time, and then the day sometimes can get away from you. With any form of written communication, it's really important to remember that there's a record of everything, and that helps you recap things. That also, if you're going back and you're not sure what was discussed, it's a great way of maintaining that documentation on a decision. I like to use email after a big meeting as a written record to recap what we've agreed on or what direction that we're going. It also gives your stakeholders a chance to come back to you and give you feedback. Hey, did I hear this right? No, I think we wanted to go in this direction. And that's going to save you a lot of time of going down perhaps a rabbit hole that was not necessary. Meetings are going to take up a lot of your time, depending on what industry and where you end up. We sit in a lot of meetings. One thing I love to do is check the invitation list before I go and see which stakeholders will be in the room. I think it's important to know how to cater your message to a different audience. Am I speaking to a group of executives? Am I speaking to a client? Am I speaking to my peers? Am I speaking to people who work with me? And then really know how to cater your message to most effectively get through to them. Also think about if I'm meeting with more technical people, what kind of information am I giving them versus a more high level summary or overview, maybe for an executive team. It goes without saying, you want to be on time, early if possible, and very respectful of the other people around the table, whether it's the table or a virtual table. Active listening is really important. You want to be looking at the folks who are speaking, engaging, taking notes, even if that's something that helps you, but really listen to process what they're saying, not just to get through the couple of points that you wanted to make, because this is where the best collaboration can happen. Things can pivot, and you may see things from a different perspective. I did want to touch on the environment a bit because we are in a hybrid world, and you may be working from home full time, you may be in an office full time, or you might be somewhere in the middle. Working from home has become very popular over the last couple of years, and it's greatly convenient. However, you want to make sure that you're still bringing your best self to work, even if work is in your own home. I think it's really important to pay attention to your background. You don't want anything too distracting. You don't want anything too loud that would pull away from you. I think that a lot of the times we get worried that, somebody's going to cross into our meeting, and everybody has had to work at home at this point. We understand if there's a kid or a pet or a family member that pops into screen, and don't let it throw you off. But what's in view normally is within your control, and so that's a good thing to think about. If you're working in an office, you also want to think about what's on display, and how that represents you. But also your body language. And body language is important when you're on a virtual meeting as well. But if you think about when you're just sitting there and you're working, you want to remember that people can see you and they're looking at you, how you react to things. It's a great way to get to know people, being in an office. But you also have to make sure that you're managing what they see. Now, here at AB, we sit on a big open floor plan, which is really great. Everybody from our interns to our CEO has the same desk. We're out and about, but that also creates some other challenges. So it's really important that we moderate volume, distractions, what we're doing, and try to make sure that we can keep on task, make sure that we're not distracting the people around us. So it's really dependent on what kind of environment your company is operating in. But if you have the option, I know it's convenient sometimes to stay at home. If you have the option to meet a client or have a big important meeting in person, I always recommend taking that opportunity. You always get a little bit more from the body language and the visual cues, spending time together. And it can be a bit more cumbersome, but typically is very worthwhile. So, in conclusion, I know it can be really overwhelming, but it's exciting to start a new opportunity. You want to be kind to yourself. There's always a learning curve. I talk with a lot of my newer joiners about that period of time where it feels like you're drinking out of a fire hose. You're just not sure what's going on or what you're doing. And it's easy to have imposter syndrome and to be nervous. But then all of a sudden, and it happens for everybody, it happens at different times, but I see it happen. There's this curve and this switch, and you start to talk, and you're talking about what you're working on, and you really know it, and you're confident. And it happens without you even realizing it. You're absorbing so much in those first couple of months on the job. So I would encourage you all to just make your best effort to learn as much as you can, be kind to yourself, and go in with an open mind. And so, with that, I would love to open it up to any questions or perhaps any experiences that people have had in a new company.
I'll start with a question, and
Thanks, Jen.
we'll keep an eye on the chat window. I always love and think it's very effective to learn from others' mistakes or things that have happened in the past that didn't go quite right or maybe went really well. So I was just wondering, do you have any stories or things that you've had to correct people on in the first 90 days? Some I'm sure could be a little crazier than others, or things you never thought you'd have to say, just
Yes.
anything out to you. I would love to hear.
Yeah, I mean, listen, everybody has like their couple of fumbles in the first 90 days, and we try to be understanding. Um, I think that one of the more common things I see, Jen, especially with, I know there's some folks on this call who are coming out of university or coming out of programs. It can be really hard to take things from the academic to the work setting. In school or in a program, you have a defined problem, and the goal is to get the right answer. But here, there's not really a right answer, and that can be a little bit frustrating. I think that what I encourage people to do is understand the why. And why are we doing this? And why do we need to solve this problem? And what are the implications? I think that's been probably the biggest piece of challenge in the transitions. Outside of that, no, really just the things that I spoke about, making sure that you're, dressing appropriately for the culture of the office, that you're meeting people, and that you're not so focused on learning your job that you don't interact with the right folks.
That sounds great. Let's see. We have a question from Eric. He says, any suggestions for joining a new team after a reorganization?
Yeah, Eric, that's a great question. And I think that we've seen a lot of changes in the last couple of years. So it was a really relevant time to be talking about it. I'm assuming you're talking about being at the same company. It's important to remember that each team has its own culture. Each manager has their own management style and communication style. So I would approach it the same way as starting a new role, and then leaning on your historical context. You don't want to be that person that comes in and says, on my old team, we did it like this. However, there's a lot of opportunities to say, hey, have we considered doing it like XYZ? I've been successful with that in the past, working with project ABC. I think in a reorg, there's so much, there's a lot of questions and can make people uncomfortable. My approach in any kind of reorganization is that this is the time to put my head down, do my job, be helpful, absorb the changes, and then wait to make any sorts of big changes or suggestions outside of that, because there's so much going on. And a lot of the time, you may feel like you're not getting communication or what you need from your leadership when truly they're focused on moving things forward. So also don't be afraid to ask questions. Does that answer your question, Eric? Awesome.
He said yes. Yeah.
I see that. Thank you.
Let's see. Deanna says, culture is the most difficult part of a new job. You mentioned not to be all work. How does that differ from putting your head down and doing the work?
Yeah. Deanna, that's a really good question as well. I think it's hard to know what the right balance is, and you will get better at that as you move on in your career and you become more comfortable. Um, but culture isn't just fun. It's not just having fun. It's not just what people do. It's the way that an organization operates, right? So it could be cultural norms in terms of how people are emailing, communicating, interacting with each other. Um, and you're right. You want to put your head down and you want to do a great job, but you don't want to have blinders on. You want to be able to meet with the right people, to come in, maybe get rid of some of those preconceived notions on how things could work or should work in your industry or in your role, and learn from those around you. And so I think part of absorbing that culture is also learning the way that people do work and the way that they interact, uh, while also focusing on the task at hand. You're very welcome.
Any other questions or comments? We have one. Do you see it? Or would you like me to read it?
Yeah, if you could read it, that would be great.
Sure. It says, hi, as a new employee, is it a good trait to stay a bit late at work, at least initially, learning a new role, or go home the same time that everyone else does? Thank you.
There's an age-old question. So I'm going to push that back on you a little bit. And I think it's important to stay and to do your work and learn what you need to do. And sure, there's times to go above and beyond, but don't sit in ceremony, right? I've seen so many times where people come in and your first day, you can't even access most of the systems and you're sitting there. That also doesn't reflect great if you're just kind of sitting there looking like you're trying to be busy. I think it's not just as a new employee, it's always in your career. I think there's different seasons of work, and as you manage your different priorities and projects, there are going to be times that you need to put in the extra hours. But it's also important to recognize the times where you can let off the gas a little bit and take advantage of that to make sure that you're doing all of the things you need to take care of your whole self. Um, and it is good to look to people around you, right? You don't want to be the first one out the door every day when you're brand new. Typically, you can ask some of these questions in advance too. What time does the team typically start? What do they do for lunch? What's customary? But making sure that you're also setting your own boundaries in the process.
She said, great answer.
Thank you. Other questions, thoughts, different experiences starting a new role? Jen, I'd like to throw that question actually back on you. I know you joined the NTC in the recent past, or not so recent anymore. Time has flown. But could you talk a little bit about your experience and what you've done to get used to working in a new environment?
Yes, and I came here, this is at NTC, it's a smaller office of 10 people. And like you, it's an open floor plan. So everyone from the CEO to all the rest of us all sit together out in the open. And that was newer for me as well. I came from a more corporate situation that was a much larger, it was also pretty open, and we did have issues with noise there. We had very, very loud talkers, and it made it hard for the others to be able to have calls, but it's not like that here. We have small rooms here that we can go into to make phone calls. And so we always do that. But yeah, when I came in here, it was a whole new culture. Anytime you start a new job, it's always a little different. So you have to get used to it. And I just kind of used context clues and listened and, heard what they would say about, when people typically come in the morning, when people typically leave. And it's been a good flow of just get your job done, really, and do what you need to do. But I had to kind of listen and learn. And I asked some questions about what people most, usually do. Because I didn't want to be, like you said, the only one leaving at a certain time every day. Or I love what you said about don't sit in ceremony. Don't just sit and stay late because you feel like you should. So I learned a lot from the others here and asking questions. And so it turned out to be a really good way to come into this job. And I have acclimated pretty well, and you keep learning things too. We have new events that we do annually that each one is a new one for me. So, I'm learning each time how I can step in and offer to help and,
Yeah,
what
you
I
make
can
a
do.
really good point, Jen. It's going to be iterative. You figure it out. You're going to make mistakes, and you're going to keep going.
Right, right. And it's not just in the first 90 days that you make a mistake, or that you make mistakes and learn. It's, February will be a year for me. And, I keep learning,
Wow.
with every event that we hold, every tech coach that we have, I learn more and more. So it's been really good.
Yeah, no, that's
Good
great.
integration. I've had many opportunities over the years, with new jobs to learn how to integrate with a new company. And so I think communication is really important, though, as you
Yeah.
mentioned, and feeling comfortable, even a young person coming just out of college, learning how to be comfortable asking these questions, because it is okay to ask these questions. What's the norm for when people are coming in? It's okay. And I want people to feel comfortable doing that. I think that's
Yeah,
important. Um,
absolutely.
let's see, we have some more questions. Um, culture for me is a coworker in the next cubicle, clipping nails and walking around without shoes, probably meant shoes.
Wow. Looks like that comes from Gina. You know, some people are very comfortable bringing their whole self to work, and I really appreciate that. If it's something that is upsetting to you, again, feel free to, have that conversation. I see she wrote, it's just a bit funny. Sure. You know, that's a really good point as well. You have to remember to have fun and to laugh. That's part of the culture. I sit, like I said, on a big open floor plan with a bunch of folks on my team. And a lot of the time it's business, a lot of the time we're in the zone. But funny things happen and life happens, and you spend more time with your coworkers and colleagues than you do with your family sometimes at the end of the day. And so it's good to laugh.
That is true. Let's see, we have another question. As a new hire, is a good thing to reach out to your new colleagues before your first day? If
Mm,
so, what will be the best way to do it?
yeah. I always appreciate that. I also encourage my managers to reach out to their employees before they start to try to help answer any questions they may have. Likely you're in touch with somebody in your human resources department or recruiter. They have all the contact information, and it really depends what you're comfortable with. I mean, you've likely interviewed with the people that you'll be working with. I think that sending an email, hey, I'm really excited to join. Thank you for the opportunity, is enough. Or if, hey, I also have these couple of questions. When I think back to when I started here, and the firm was, people were transitioning down from New York. A lot of people were joining. It was really helpful for me to be able to speak to people that I had met throughout my interview and networking process and ask them questions. And maybe it's not the team you're working with, maybe it's somebody you met along the way, or somebody that you've networked with at an NTC event. And say, hey, like, that's a great person to ask. What do I wear on my first day? What can I expect? And you'll find people as you come in and start working, that will be your great question answers, your resources, um, and even your friends.
And if you don't have somebody's email, I suppose you could also reach out on LinkedIn.
You could, absolutely. I think LinkedIn can get a little bit congested. So I would just kind of caveat that with, if you don't get an answer back right away, there can be a lot of noise on LinkedIn. And I would hate for somebody to think, oh, they're not responding to me. I know I go through periods where I'm not great about checking it. I will check it after this if people have other questions they want to follow up with. But you can always ask for their email address. Or typically, the naming conventions will be very similar across. Ours are all first dot last name at AllianceBernstein.com. And that's really helpful if you're looking someone up, or just, you know, give them a call. I think we used to see a lot more handwritten notes. Everything moves so quickly now. You don't get it as much, but we were just talking about this with my team the other day. Is the people who do write those notes, it means a lot. I save them all.
Yeah, because it's not as common anymore, that's for sure.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of them.
me too.
I am, which I've pushed, into my high schoolers, and now I have one in college, and I've always made them write thank you notes for the holidays, and they don't like it, but I think
Yeah.
hopefully they'll take something from
It's a
that.
great habit to get into, even when you've worked with somebody, you've had a really impactful meeting, somebody's gone out of their way. Um, I see a comment, hard to do with remote work. Can you just clarify what you're asking there? I think it's Eric.
Yeah, I'm not sure which comment. Handwritten notes, he said.
Oh, um, in terms of mailing them, you mean? Um, I think a lot of times you're right. They won't give away addresses, but if you reach out to your HR person, typically you can send them the note, and they will have it delivered to the right address. They can't give that information away. Um, it's also okay to ask. I think in a remote environment, obviously you want to have that quick follow up, and an email can be great. But maybe you've just spent time at a conference, or you've just finished a big project. It's good to recognize that with something, even if it is a bit more of a formal email. It's just nice to acknowledge when things are going well.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, writing someone who's working remotely when you don't have
Mhm.
their address. That was a good point, Eric. Let's see, we have another question. I wonder how we can get along well with other employees quickly as a new employee in the company.
Yeah, um, that's important. And I also think it's important to know you're not going to want to be everybody's best friend. You may not even like everyone, but you have to be respectful. And I think that a lot of what we talked about earlier with communication is helpful. Um, I think about how different individuals like to be communicated too. And that's a great way to start building your relationship. Do they want all of the details and numbers and statistics? Do they want a quick tweet of the byline of what's going on? Do they want to see things organized in a certain way? That helps build trust. And I think that it's really important as you're starting to work with people, whether they're managing you, you're managing them, they're your peers. Just building that rapport of when I say I'm going to do something, it's going to get done. And here's my follow up. Or back to managing expectations. Hey, I understand this is really important. This is also really important. Help me order how I'm going to take care of these things for you. And you'd be surprised a lot of the time to say, oh, I don't need that till next week. And it can completely free up or remove the need to stay. I see Deanna's said, bring donuts. That always works. Always foolproof. Working in offices, like especially now after Halloween, there is so much candy everywhere. But all joking aside, it's a great if you want to bring something in to share. Another thing I've really appreciated is I have so many different colleagues that come from different backgrounds and cultures, and they've brought in different foods or items for holidays that they celebrate, and it's a great way to get to know people and learn a little bit more about their culture.
Yeah, and going back to her original question, how can we get along with other employees quickly? Again, I say be friendly. Introduce yourself to people and just be friendly and nice. And also, many companies have things going on that you can join.
Yes.
They might have be going to do some service work, or they just smaller little groups or committees that are planning something fun in the office. Get involved, which will
Mhm.
help get to know different people.
Yeah, we have what we call employee wellness groups and employee resource groups, and they're caged around different things that people either identify with or different sports. If you're really into soccer, then see if they have a soccer team and join it. You're going to meet people across different levels, and you're going to interact with them in a completely different way. And when you change the environment, you change the relationship. So as hard as it is when you're learning that new job, it's great to get involved in the things that you're excited about. Now, I will say you can fall into the trap of I'm going to join everything. I want to do this. I want to do that. Same challenge. We see it a lot with students in school. I would look at, maybe one personal thing and one other activity that you're really excited about and get involved and do a really great job with that and meeting those people to start. And it's okay if you want to change what those activities are as time goes on.
Great questions. Any more questions? We have time.
Absolutely. Well, if you do
Okay.
have other questions, please, like I said, feel free to email me, reach out on LinkedIn. I think a lot of the questions come up when you're doing it and you're sitting there in that seat. And so remember, whether it's reaching out to us, reaching out to a mentor, reaching out to somebody in your organization, always ask the questions.
Yes. Well, we've reached our time and I don't see any other questions at the moment. So thank you so much, Allie. Really appreciate your expertise.
Well, thank you, Jen, and thank you everyone for attending. You have a great day.